It started like every unforgettable story in Hollywood does, with chemistry that no script could contain. When 50 Shades of Grey premiered, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson became inseparable in the public imagination. Every glance between them, every nervous laugh during an interview, every moment of stillness on set seemed to hint at something deeper, something unspoken. Their connection was undeniable, magnetic, and, for a time, beautiful. But behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, reality had its own story to tell. The movie made them global icons overnight, but it also trapped them in roles they didn't entirely control. They weren't just actors anymore, they were symbols of desire, of fantasy, of everything fans projected onto them. And somewhere between the takes and the headlines, the line between who they were on screen and who they were in real life began to blur. In those early years, they laughed it off. Dakota would roll her eyes during interviews, teasing Jamie with her signature smirk. Jamie would play along, half amused, half cautious, always aware of the world watching. But even the most natural chemistry can grow heavy when it's forced to live under a microscope. Rumors came like clockwork, that they couldn't stand each other, that they secretly dated, that their partners were jealous, that they'd stopped talking. Every time a camera caught them not smiling, it became evidence of a feud. Every pause became a headline. At first, they ignored it. Then, slowly, the warmth between them began to fade in public. The interviews became more formal, the jokes less frequent. Fans who once celebrated their closeness began noticing the space, the invisible wall that had quietly formed between them. No one really knew what caused it. Some said it was the exhaustion of being tied together for too long. Others thought it was the pressure, the endless comparisons, the whispers, the expectation that their on-screen love should mirror reality. But maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe they just needed distance to breathe. Jamie threw himself into new roles, trying to redefine himself beyond Christian Grey. Dakota dove into art house films and her own projects, determined to prove she was more than Anastasia Steele. Their paths diverged naturally, yet every time one of them appeared in an interview, the other's name always seemed to find its way back into the conversation. Even when they weren't speaking, their silence spoke volumes. In 2018, Dakota was asked in an interview whether she still kept in touch with Jamie. Her answer was vague but telling. "We have a connection that doesn't need to be explained." She smiled, but her eyes seemed to say something else. A kind of wistfulness, like remembering a chapter she wasn't sure how to reopen. Jamie, too, once admitted that the 50 Shades experience wasn't easy, and that he and Dakota went through something very intense together. He called her brave and kind, yet fans couldn't ignore the hesitance in his tone, as if there were more words behind the ones he chose. Years passed. Both moved on, new films, new projects, new lives. But every time they appeared in the same sentence, the same spark reignited online. Fan pages compared old clips. Paparazzi recycled photos. The internet refused to let go of what once was. And maybe, deep down, neither did they. Because when two people share something so vulnerable, so public, yet so personal, it never really disappears. It just lingers, quiet and unresolved. That's why, when news broke that Jamie and Dakota were spotted together again after years of silence, the internet erupted. It wasn't at a Hollywood party or a red carpet reunion. It was something simpler. A private screening event in Los Angeles, quiet, low-key, unplanned. Witnesses said their meeting was brief at first, polite smiles, a few words, the kind of restrained warmth that comes from old familiarity. But then, something shifted. The smiles softened, the tension melted. For the first time in years, they looked at each other the way they used to, not as co-stars, not as symbols, but as people who had once walked through fire together and somehow made it out alive. As one fan wrote later that night, it wasn't the reunion anyone expected, but it was the one we all needed. That evening didn't end with a grand gesture or viral moment. No one shouted, no one cried, but those who were there described an energy that felt peaceful. Like closure was finally finding its way in. And maybe that's where it all begins again, Not with drama, but with understanding. The air in the small theater that night was soft with nostalgia. Like the world itself had stopped holding its breath. After the private screening ended and the lights came up, most people drifted toward the exits. But Jamie and Dakota lingered. Neither of them had planned to. It just happened. They found themselves standing near the back row, the glow from the projector washing their faces in muted gold. For a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. And yet, so much had. Dakota broke the silence first. "It's strange," she said quietly. "We spent years pretending to know each other more than anyone else, but maybe we forgot to really know each other at all." Jamie smiled faintly, that same crooked smile that had once melted millions. "I don't think we forgot," he replied. "I think we just stopped talking about it." There it was. The truth they had both avoided for nearly a decade. The years of rumors, the interviews twisted into gossip, the endless headlines about what they were or weren't. It had built a wall neither of them knew how to climb. But now, standing there in the dim theater, that wall began to crumble. Dakota looked at him for a long time, her eyes soft but searching. "You know," she said, "people thought we hated each other." Jamie laughed, almost bitterly. "Yeah, and for a while, I think we started to believe it, too." She nodded. "We were just tired. Everything we did, every smile, every touch, belonged to someone else. To the movie, to the fans. We lost the parts that were ours." He didn't argue. He simply looked at her. Really looked. As if seeing the woman behind all the characters, all the noise. "You were the best partner I could have had," he said finally. "I just never said it enough." The words hung between them, fragile and real. Dakota's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I always knew." Outside, the world kept spinning, cameras waiting, stories forming, fans still obsessed with a decade-old fantasy. But inside that quiet moment, there were no roles, no expectations, no past scripts. Just two people who had lived through the strangest kind of intimacy, public and private all at once. Finally letting go of the weight it left behind. Jamie leaned against a seat, exhaling. "You know, sometimes I think people forget we were just two actors trying to survive something massive." Dakota smiled gently. "We didn't just survive it. We made it human." That sentence seemed to reach him somewhere deep. For the first time, he looked peaceful. They talked for nearly an hour, about films, family, everything and nothing. There was laughter again, the kind that comes easily when old wounds stop hurting. Every few minutes, a pause would stretch between them, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm. It was closure. And as they prepared to leave, Dakota turned back one last time. "I'm glad we had this," she said softly. "I think we both needed it." Jamie nodded. "Yeah, maybe this was the ending we never got to film." That line would later echo across social media after a fan overheard it. The ending they never got to film. But for those who truly understood, it wasn't about romance. It was about healing. When the photos surfaced the next morning, the two of them smiling as they left the building, side by side, the internet predictably lost its mind. Headlines screamed about a reunion, rekindled chemistry, the spark reignited. But the truth was quieter, simpler, infinitely more human. They hadn't rekindled anything. They'd released it. Later that week, Dakota posted a single photo on her Instagram story, a blurry image of city lights with the caption, "Sometimes closure looks like kindness." She didn't tag anyone, but everyone knew. Jamie, a few days later, shared a short video promoting his new project. But at the end, when the interviewer asked about Dakota, his response made fans pause. "She's one of the strongest people I know," he said with a warm smile. "We'll always have respect, and that's rare." And that was it. No scandal, no bitterness, just two people, finally free from the weight of misunderstanding. For years, the world had imagined their story as one of tension, unresolved, tragic, or secretly romantic. But maybe that was never the real story. Maybe it was always about growth, the kind that happens quietly, off camera, when no one's watching. Because sometimes, the most powerful endings don't involve love confessed or lost. They involve peace. The kind that comes when you finally understand someone without needing to change them. As one fan beautifully commented under Jamie's post, "It's not about falling back in love. It's about finally being okay." And maybe, that's what Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson found that night. Not each other, but themselves.